All right, we had a very interesting draft with the Minnesota Vikings draft. I'm actually probably going to be a little bit nicer on this draft than some other people would in certain aspects and probably a lot harsher in other aspects. So, the Vikings' new GM, everything we're hearing is analytics guy, right? And so that's why he traded down because, hey, trading down, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what analytics say. And I want to start off with the trades. You see the list of players over here, as long as I don't forget to edit it in like I accidentally did with my Patriots video. You should see that. Just so you know what you're looking at, that's all the players they drafted. The number all the way on the left is when they were drafted. The number right next to their name, that is what their projected value was in terms of the consensus draft board. But first, let's get into the trade. Got a lot of criticism for trading back. A lot of people said that's just not good value. And if you use the Jimmy Johnson scale, the one we all grew up using, that would be true. It would be horrendous value. However, using more advanced models, it seems like it's actually good value by the Vikings. The Johnson scale is outdated, and this is a good move to trade back. It's pretty much always a good move to trade back because they got an extra player. And so even though it feels like, wait, you moved up 20s, you moved back 20 spots in round 1 and only moved up 17 spots in round 2, and all you got was a third round pick for it. But keep in mind, 66th overall pick, which is, yes, it's a third round pick technically, but it's still a high pick. You can still get a good player with that. So that's why they actually, according to, if you just look at regular models, won the trade. So I'm actually not as critical on it as others are. Although I saw a point on the Vikings Reddit that I agree with, which is someone brought up the fact that it's kind of like if you have a house that's worth, say, $400,000 and the market value for the house is actually $500,000, if you sell it for $450,000, that's still a bad deal because you could have made more even though you're still selling it for more than the actual value. That's kind of how I feel about the 12th overall pick with the Vikings. It's still probably a good move, but they could have maybe done better there. So anyways, first pick, Lewis Cine, who, by the way, I love. I think Lewis Cine is awesome. He is someone who I had ahead of Kyle Hamilton. So he was 32nd picked. He's 32nd on the consensus board. I think he can be a really good safety for him. He fits their scheme, I would assume. I guess I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I feel like he fits with Harrison Smith better than a Kyle Hamilton would, where, you got two different roles that allows Cine to kind of be more of the speed guy and lets Harrison Smith do his Harrison Smith type things in his own right. And I got Andrew Booth, pick 42, who's a really quality corner for them and should be, position of need. These are the great picks. So those first two picks I was all in on. We got some weird ones here. So first, Ed Ingram at 59, who on the consensus big board, he was 99. So that's a decent reach. And also, again, if this is an analytics GM, these next two picks are very not analytics, at least from what I understand about analytics. Maybe he has models that are different. That's possible. But Ingram, offensive linemen, typically are the kind of picks that analytics can grade very well. You can look at certain stats that translate very well from the college level to the NFL level, but he's someone who didn't have particularly great numbers in those categories, which is why I'm just a little confused by that. So didn't really love that pick. Brian Asamoah is another guy who I wasn't a huge fan of, and he, typically linebackers, you want them to clear a certain threshold if they're going to be good pros. He did not clear that threshold. So the analytics, which I believe the Vikings are using here, weren't actually on the side of that. So I'm a little bit just confused about those picks. Even though I don't hate them as players, they felt a little bit like reaches and kind of negated the gained value you got from trading back, which kind of makes the draft look worse, in my opinion. The next two picks were interesting. Couple of tough names to pronounce. Caleb Evans here, who's a corner who, what's interesting about him in particular, I guess just that he's like a solid corner. And what I think, the reason why I find this pick fascinating is I think it's a good idea just to take chances on corners. This might be something we start seeing teams do more and more of, similar to how we see teams draft the receivers in those mid-rounds. Well, it's probably still a good strategy for the same logic of drafting corners. They're hard to evaluate. They're hard to figure out who's going to be good, so just get an extra one. Great, it makes the odds better of you drafting a good corner. And hey, guess what? If he ends up working out, now you have an extra good corner. Like, that's not a bad thing to have good corners. So he's a fascinating guy. Also, again, this might be a tough name to pronounce here. Ezeki Atomwu is what we'll go with. Atomwu is an interesting guy as well. Seems like more of a run defender, not much of a pass rusher at all. Again, he's a guy who, if you look at analytics, pass rush, not spectacular. So you look at these picks too. Like, all of these picks, literally all of these picks except for Andrew Booth, were people who they drafted earlier than what was on the consensus big board. So again, just kind of odd. Next up, at pick 169, they went with Ty Chandler, running back, who should be a solid running back for them. Again, I don't hate drafting running backs at this spot. Kind of, once you get past 150, that feels like the cutoff for me of like, okay, draft a running back, that's fine. If you want them, they can typically play special teams as well. So, could be someone to be behind Dalvin Cook. So that's certainly interesting. And then with pick 149, they get the 231st rated prospect on the consensus big board, Verdanen Love, another offensive lineman who he seemed like he could be a solid run blocker. So maybe he's someone who, he's probably just a depth guy at this point in the draft. That's what I would assume. And then finally, the last two guys, they might just be special teamers. I don't know. But Jalen Naylor, first for the wide receiver at pick 192. Again, could potentially, probably just a depth wide receiver and someone who plays special teams. But, did have a couple of really good games at Michigan State. So there's some potential of him being like a solid vertical threat, which would be cool. So he's not the biggest guy at 5'11", 186, but there's some talent here for sure. And then Nick Muse here, tight end, who could be a solid blocker and again could play special teams. So I know that those guys really far down the consensus big board rankings. They're not spectacular. This was a weird draft. There's really no other way to look at it other than a weird draft. And as someone who, I am pretty into analytics, I find this stuff fascinating, and I think I have a decent understanding of it. A lot of these moves didn't make sense from an analytics perspective, let alone just from, a football perspective in general. Don't hate the move of trading down. I just didn't love some of these picks, so it wasn't my favorite draft. I'm sorry, it wasn't. I was a little bit underwhelmed because I expected more early on, but there's still moves I liked, like Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth. If those guys both hit, which I think they will, like, this is still a pretty good draft. Like, they had pretty good value because of that trade down, and they were able to get some good players, I think. So it's not like it was an awful draft by any means, but they just made, I feel like it could have been better, I guess is what I would say. But that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What were your thoughts on the Vikings draft? Do you disagree? Do you like some of these guys? Let me know. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.